All right. Well, welcome everybody to a Black Men Read book discussion for our September book club pick, The Street by Ann Petry. We have a group of book club admins and a special guest with us today.
Yes,
So we're going to
sir.
start off by going around introducing everybody. So Demetrius, you start off.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess we got maybe even good morning. Seems like Callie's checking in. Good to see y'all. I'm Demetrius Frazier, founder and book club admin for Black Men Read. Glad to be here. Glad to have my guy, Reggie Bailey, joining us. So I'm going to pass the ball to Kenneth, even though I don't want to pass the ball to him right now because he's killing me in fantasy football. But yeah, Kenneth, go ahead and say your piece, man. Go ahead and say your piece.
Yeah. First of all, I thank everybody for coming in here. I think I had a big part to do with this book being selected for Black Men Reads Pick of the Month for September. It's funny enough because the way I found out about the book was actually through Reggie Bailey. um, when I first came into Black Men Read, of course, I got introduced to this whole beautiful family of Black readers. I had no idea it existed before, and I started checking out Reggie Bailey and books are pop culture, and the first thing I saw him mentioning was a challenge he had of through the decades, and I just saw him going on and on about a book called The Street by Ann Petry, and I was like, "Who's Ann Petry? What is this book?" And I read his review on a Goodreads, and I watched the talks he did, and I had to go and get it, and I read it. And I was just like he said, I was like, my man did not lie about a single thing he said about this book. It was amazing. Um, it was a great read, and yeah, I just thought, hey, I need to share this with the group. We need to get this as a book pick. This was a tremendously, incredibly written book. I hope everyone else felt the same, but I guess we're about to find out, right?
Yeah. And to add to more context to Kenneth, Kenneth had posted a video praising this book, so we had to put the book as our pick for the month.
Raymond, he said one of the greatest books I ever read in my life. That's what
Yes,
he said. So,
yes,
I mean,
we had to.
got to read it at that point.
And I don't usually post videos, so if I pulled a video out on it, then it was it was a big moment.
Hey, Kenneth, I appreciate your kind words, and I'll also add, I sound good. First off, I did what y'all told me to do. Okay, cool. So, Kenneth, first off, thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate everything you
Yes,
said
sir.
about, books of pop culture, 10 books, 10 decades, of course, and Petrie. Great to be in conversation with you, and of course, Demetrius and Raymond. I was saying it off camera, good to see y'all. But of course, it's a pleasure to be here on y'all YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber, definitely support these men by subscribing. It's free, it doesn't cost you nothing. They're doing good work. So, y'all make sure to support Black Men Read now if you're here. They're just good people. So we need to support good people. And regarding Ann Petry, yeah, I mean when I first read this, back in 2017, I was just like taken aback, right? Because this was one of the and I won't go too hard because I know we gonna, really get into it. But I was just taken aback by like what I realize now is the this is what people call the pursuit of the American dream, right? It's a little bit different when you're black, of course, and I'm sure we'll get into all that, and even more different when you're a woman who's black. But nonetheless, I was taken aback by that, and I was taken aback by how much I related to this work. And that is the more I read it, the more I engage with it, the more relatable and relevant it becomes in a lot of ways.
Great. And before we proceed, Kenneth started off with this, but Reggie Bailey, also known as Reggie Reads, one half of the greatest black book podcast, books are pop culture. We are grateful to have you with us today. I don't know if I introduced myself, but Raymond, I'm one of the book club admins, and glad to have you all here who are watching us. So if you have any questions throughout, put it in the chat. we'll try to address them, and we'll proceed. So, so Kenneth mentioned that he found this book because of you, Reggie. How did you hear about it? I know you said you heard about it in 2017, but did someone recommend it to you, or what was that process like?
So basically 2017 is like shortly after I kind of like began reading books recreationally. And I pretty much found it on my own, I won't lie. Like, I used to, and admittedly still do frequent Amazon.com a lot just to locate books, because there's not a book that you can't find usually on there, right? And the category that I actually found it in, I think they call it now, it's like, I think Black and African descent or something like that. But they had like in there, like they have all these different types of categories. So it was called politics and social sciences, and within politics and social sciences there was African American studies. And I saw a book called The Street. So because this was in like a seemingly non-fictional section, I thought it was nonfiction at first. But then I read the synopsis. I was like, oh, this is a novel. They have a novel in African American studies section, which is not typical.
No.
But I found it. I looked into it. I realized that this is the first novel written by an African American woman that sold over 1 million copies. I was like, yeah, I'll read it. I'm sure it's good if it sold over at least 1 million copies. So that's my introduction to it.
All right, great. And like Kenneth, I had never heard of this book until Reggie mentioned it. How about you, Demetrius? Was it same thing?
Same for me. I had not heard of Ann Petry or The Street, so it wasn't even like, oh, I heard of The Narrows, but not The Street. Nothing like that. And it doesn't surprise me though, right? I mean, we've all been through, especially for us who are over 30, maybe over 40, similar experiences, right? You've heard of James Baldwin, you've heard of Toni Morrison, you hear the super heavyweight names, but you don't necessarily get dug into some of the ones that are not as and I want to say not as successful, because again, a book that's sold over 1 million copies that's nothing to sneeze at. But just to say that they didn't have that name recognition, that acclaim that some of the other people had, that's where Ann Petry kind of fits. She's a great author. We're gonna get into why this book is a must read for everybody. But it's a shame that it took this long to get here. I'm glad we're talking about it. But to think that, this could have been something I learned in high school or college around those time frames, or even in being exposed to it even earlier, is really the point, right? That's why we're talking about it today.
So let's get on into the book. Where do y'all want to start? What do y'all want to address first, in terms of the plot, in terms of the characters? Where y'all want to go with this?
So I think an easy way to kind of set this up is, everybody can go check out the book if you haven't picked it up. Ann Petry's The Street, amazing book, available everywhere. I haven't found a spot that it's not there. But give the elevator pitch. If you had to tell somebody and you got half a minute to tell everybody what this book is about, how would you pitch this book to it? Because apparently it's in the nonfiction section. It's in the fiction section. How would you accurately pitch this book and be like, this is something you should read? Like, I'm putting y'all on the spot, but how would you describe this book?
So what I would say is this is a debut novel from an author named Ann Petry, that came out in 1946. It is the first novel by an African American woman that sold over 1 million copies. You gotta say that first, because during your pitch, if they know, oh, it went platinum, right? Now they're like,
right.
It's gotta be good, right? So you gotta say that part.
Yep.
But then you talk about how it centers on a newly single mother named Ludi Johnson, who has moved into Harlem on 116th Street. She is there with her son Bub, and essentially what we are seeing in this novel is this woman in pursuit of the American dream. Her past pursuit of it, her present pursuit of it, and we see all of the structures and the people that will not allow her to pursue the American dream. And you can also say that it also shows other characters obtainment of the American dream or the pursuit of it as well.
Yep.
So that would be like my 30-second pitch, and
So, so
hopefully it
how
worked.
would, and this for Raymond and Kenneth too, how would you add to what Reggie said? You know how they put that line where it says it's perfect for, like, I mean, because you could actually put in some nonfiction titles, because this thing kind of rolls right through everything that happened and in the real life, you know, Harlem. So how would you put that?
So I would add, and Reggie, please add to more context for us. But if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Ann Petry like a journalist or something like that before, or am I getting that mixed up?
No, you're 100% correct. A journalist from Connecticut too.
Okay.
So she's actually writing about an area which she covered as a journalist.
Oh, okay. You know, one of the things that kind of, at least for the elevator pitch for me, it was kind of like in the very beginning of the book, where it was sort of posed where she kind of, Ludi, when I'm saying she, is aware that things are about to go awry in some fashion, right? Because of where she's moving to, the different the relationship she ended with her husband, and then she goes into this new neighborhood, and you just know things are going to like go bad. You just don't know how bad. And I think one of the pitches that I would say in terms of this book is, don't read that much about what it's about, because I felt like one of the things that I really enjoyed about this book was not knowing a lot going in. And it was, for me, it was a book that you know, I enjoyed very much, because that the element of the unknown was there, like not knowing where it was going to go, how it was going to end, you know, this, that, and the other. So
Yeah, I think Reggie and Raymond basically covered just about everything you could to get someone sold on reading this book. I would probably just add in little bits like, hey, if you you want a real story, something you're really going to enjoy, you know, this is for you. If you also want to get to the end and just sit there and stare at a wall and be like, man, this this was written in 1946, but it's still so relevant to today in 2022. And you're just going to sit there and you're going to get in deep thought about that and how that's possible, but it's just going to take you back to that story. You're just going to start to replay moments, and you're just going to start to realize that, man, 1946, and this was taking place in what time period? And some of these issues are still relevant today. And it's just, yeah, it's going to be a awakening experience for you.
yeah, like you said, that 80 years, almost 80 years from its publication. Now, obviously, there's some references that are specific to the 40s, but like what you're saying is correct. Is I had that same thought when I finished it. I was like, wow, what has truly changed, right? So,
And I love the book for it. It was, you know, extremely, I think I got a comment said extremely relatable. I love that part of it. I like the, you know, I think she did a really good job of making it where she's going to talk about super heavy topics, but she's not just going to drop it on you on that page, right? She's actually walked you up to it. And then when something happens, for example, like I'm trying not to give away too much of it, when a tragic incident happens, you know, you've kind of thought that this could be possible because she's giving you pieces of the community, she's giving you pieces of the interaction between people all along the way. And then when it happens, it's like, all right, she's already placed me in that world. And so this thing that just happened, these people, the interaction between people, how they reacted to the incident all makes sense. So like, you know, as far as it being relatable to today, you know, I fast forward to what happened in the elections, right? That didn't seem unsurprising that that could happen. We turn on TV when someone gets shot and murdered. It's almost like she took that same kind of feel, but she had to place you back to that time frame in order to do that, and she did a fantastic and marvelous job. So, if you're looking for somebody or a writer who could, you know, put you in a place in a world and do a really good job of that, the fact that that's still something I can see and I can relate to. Now I have a slight advantage. I grew up in New York, so some of the streets she was talking about, I actually lived in Jamaica. So when she was talking about streets, I'm like, yeah, you don't want to go down that street at night if you black. Like I'm remembering those incidences, but I think, you know, she just does a marvelous job of doing that. And you think about every scene that she took you through, it's the same way. Just an awesome writer as far as setting and place.
It definitely shows the importance, like when you aim to tell a story of just like making sure you live a little, like in between, like your telling of the story, right? Because her clearly her experience as a journalist, like creates this masterpiece, right? If she doesn't do that work, she can write the book, right? I mean, because you can do anything in art. You can imagine anything, you can write anything, right? But are you going to relate to the people just because you imagine it? No. But are you going to relate to the people if you live it? More than likely, yes.
Right. So let's go ahead and jump into the book itself. I'm not sure how the best way to attack a great book is. It's we don't have enough time to really talk about and give it great justice. But let's talk about some of these characters, man. I'm trying to think which one kind of jumped out to me. Which one did you feel most connected to in a positive, or one that you thought was like, I could rip out these pages and throw them in the trash and burn them? Like, where are you with the character development, and maybe which one stood out to you the most? And if you're in the comments, drop your pick in the comments as well if you've read it.
I think I'll jump in right there. We need to talk about Soup. I think that's, to me, Soup was, he started off, at least to me, it was like, okay, I can't read him. Like, I couldn't tell because, we saw how she was mentioning and how she was giving off her vibe about him, but she was like, kind of, place she doesn't want to be, kind of getting her own, apartment for the first time. Maybe she's just thinking too much into it. But as the story progresses a little bit and you start to, they let you, she puts you inside of his mind and his thoughts and what's going on. You're like, oh, so all of her vibes were completely valid. She was
Oh
she
yeah.
was right. Yeah, you crazy. You crazy. And I think that was the biggest part. And especially because when I think the other character, she called him something like what was it? Boiler room crazy or something of that sort.
Yeah.
And
Man,
I was,
and living in basements.
yeah, right. And I'm just that right there, like just him going through and just the things he's thinking about men, but he's not actually like saying it out loud. And when he actually gets to the apartment and the thoughts he starts having about the little guy and his bub, and it's like, oh man, you really are like you out there, huh? And it's so yeah, I think he was the one that stood out the most, and I was like, I thought the ending's gonna be a little bit, I don't want to say too much about it, but I thought it would include a little bit more of maybe something to do with him a little bit. But it's still, he was a very complex, well written character because it made you just, you know, yeah, that was a wild ride being inside his head.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something, Reggie, before you jump in. I don't want to lose this major point around Soup, right? He was an absolute predator. Like he was, he was everything that I would imagine a woman in 2022 fears, right? You know, I'm getting that eerie feeling on the back of my neck. I'm walking, but I feel eyes on everything but my eyeballs. He is like he was painted as the epitome of everything you would fear in the dark. And then when you get to hear his dialogue that's happening in his head around how he was thinking about stuff, it confirmed it, and it probably made it worse. Like you were thinking, oh, he's gonna try to holler at me, he's gonna try to pursue me, move around the corner. It was worse than you could ever possibly think about someone who's maybe a predator like that. Like the people he was willing to hurt, the things he was willing to do to get what he wanted was, like I said, every bit she walked us through it, right? But when he actually started doing those actions, she got us to it, and I think that's a main part of him, but also ties into a major thing about safety and Black women, especially in this time.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if Raymond was gonna jump in there, but yeah, Soup is definitely like one of the more memorable characters. Not for a good reason, obviously. Um, Soup is just one of the many men who did not have Ludi's back,
Right.
right? He, we could argue on like who is the biggest example of a man who didn't have her back, and that probably would be an interesting discussion. But he's just one of the examples of that. It's interesting because I typically like my characters to have more layers than I felt Soup did. I feel Soup was we know he's a predator and we know he's lonely, but what else do we know? We know about some of his jobs, I guess, in the past. But Soup is maybe one area of the work where I do get slightly critical a little bit, only because as a big fan of the villain, the thing that I like about villains are, there's usually a reason why they got there. And I guess one could say, maybe you do see a little bit of how he became who he is, but subjectively, I suppose it's not enough.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, though, his character is still effective. His character is still important. But the more I read the street, the more, I guess, the less dimensions I realize that Soup really has.
She built him up to be the villain, and there wasn't much feeling for Soup in that book, man. It wasn't much to it. Raymond, I think we jumped in before you got in.
I think the character for me that stood out, and of course Soup was one of those, but Mrs. Hedges was the one for me where, and that point that Reggie was mentioning about having layers, she definitely had layers where I did not see her trajectory. At first, it seemed like she was sort of protecting Ludi to a certain extent, but when you read the book, you'll see how that holds up or not. But she was the one character in the book who I wanted like a book just on her story, because they gave you some glimpses, but I'm just like, wait a minute, this happened to you? Like, and there's a scene in the book when Soup and Mrs. Hedges and Ludi are involved where I'm just like, I had a picture of Mrs. Hedges at one point in the book, but then when this scene happened, I had a whole different right. Right. I was like, Mrs. Hedges is like,
okay,
Harriet Tubman or something. Like,
I
what
was
is
thinking
going
sweet
on?
old church lady, but okay,
She put
you
the
having
muscle
people
out.
up, okay.
Yeah. So that would be the character for me, Mrs. Hedges.
I remember that
So,
scene you're talking about.
and I'm gonna be a little provocative here because I think it'll be fun. Because I see a comment here from Brian L where he's like, Miss Hedges, was very evil by choice, right? And that scene that you're talking about, do you think Miss Hedges steps in because she knows Ludi is worth, emphasis on worth, saving?
Well,
Curveball.
I don't know if y'all noticed that sound. That's the pot being stirred. That's what that is.
Yeah. No, I whenever the opportunity presents itself, why not, right?
Let's go for it.
Because the thing about it is, right, when we talking about, because Ludi is my like heavyweight champ of this novel, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing about her is everyone, and this is what happens a lot of times when you pursue the American dream, right? You start looking at people not for their humanity, but for their worth, for their transactions that they can offer you, right? And how much those transactions can be worth. And the thing about Ludi was Ludi had a worth, whether it was uh financial, emotional, whatever, to all these people who we can name, right? Like Hedges, Junto, Boots, Jim, Soup, right? Like Ludi had worth of some significant value, some significant subjective value to all of those individuals, and perhaps even like the sleazy dude at the place where she went to audition towards the end of the work, right? There's just this, everyone saw her as a transaction and not a human, and that's because everyone was lost in this pursuit of the American dream, which I won't, go down that rabbit hole just yet. But
Man.
but I feel like Miss Hedges saw something, and emphasis on this too, something worth saving in that scene.
Yeah. No, for sure. Her perch sitting at that window throughout the entire novel was important, right? For you to understand that she's not just sitting there to be nosy, right? She wasn't just like, oh, I see somebody messing around or dropping trash. She wasn't yelling at somebody getting on the grass. She was there playing chess in her head, right? When she saw somebody coming in, she knew that this was a piece in the puzzle now. And it kind of goes back to the overall theme of the entire book. You're alluding to it, and I know you're setting us up. You're taking us to the main section, but everybody's playing a game. Everybody is trying to win in an unfair game, and that's where the racism, the poverty comes in. And every time they see an opportunity, they're trying to game it. When somebody sees you can sing. They're like, how can I maneuver this piece to my advantage? How can I do something with this to get something out of it? And what you want to get out of it is different. The root doctor, he's gaming the system, right? The butcher, they're gaming the system. They're all trying to win in an unfair game. And that's, at a high level, that's what's very important about impoverished areas like that, when they're completely depressed. Everybody's just scrapping and crawling, trying to get to something. And they believe it's the American dream. Ludi's dream is just to get a nice apartment with windows and trees in the neighborhood. Think how low that bar is, right? It's just, I just would like to have my son, not become a crackhead. Like, that's literally the bar. And for them to try to reach that, they're okay with using people as pawns in that kind of game. So she definitely saw value in that, but I'm thinking she's probably gaming that, and she knew that the day that she walked into that building, the first day.
One thing I want to say to that, though, despite that bar being low, right? Doesn't the American dream contain multitudes?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it, you're right? Because pretty much when I think of this idea of the American dream, I'll necessarily think of like, a Bentley, a mansion, not even a Bentley, maybe like 4 or 5 Bentleys,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like an MTV crib or something
One
like
for
that,
every day of the week.
right?
Right?
Yeah, I got my Thursday car, my Friday car, I got 2 Friday cars actually, right? Like, none of that. Sometimes I think the beauty of the American dream is that you can say, listen, I live right here, right now. There's this neighborhood 5 minutes down the road I want to move to, and I
Right.
want to have 2 cars, 2 kids. I want to be married, and I want a gate in my backyard. I think there's room for that when we talk about it too. So sure, like, I agree that Ludi didn't want much, but I think the American dream is, if you want anything, whether that is the MTV crib or, you know, a house 3 blocks down the street,
Yeah.
you can get exactly what you want here.
I like this comment that between the Reads podcast, Audra said, I found it interesting how Ludi talked about how good looks meant certain things, just like for enslaved women. Being attractive was/is dangerous for Black women.
I saw that comment. I was like, that's a good one, especially because that's one that comes up a lot. You see a lot of people talking about how, you know, her looks before they even know her or anything. It's about the long legs, the skin, the hair, everything, and it's like, and you can tell that, yeah, that's what's on their mind. So that's a very good comment.
Something worth saving.
Yeah,
That's what you call a recall, people. It's called a recall. No, and you know, it also she kind of dealt with in the book a little bit, not too heavy-handed, but she was, what is the idea of beauty, right? You know, so remember Miss Lady in the Windows, Hedges, right? She was like, I'll never be beautiful or attractive, and I never was, right? I never had that opportunity and chance. So even before she had the accident, you know, now that she doesn't have any hair under the turban, she's like, people like people with long hair, right? So that was a conflict in the story as well. And just because someone came, Ludi, who fit that mold, everyone was moth to a flame, attracted to her and trying to get the value out of her.
We got a question from one of our book club members, Gerald McNair. Could you discuss how masculinity at the time influenced the respective identities of Junto, Boots Smith, Jones, and other male
Time to
characters?
stretch, fellas.
Do you see the same? Do you see the same kind of masculinity existing today? That's a fire question.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll take the last part. Hell yeah.
Mhm.
But
Retweet the hell yeah.
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 What do you guys think about the first part of the question?
I mean, I think it's the same masculinity that exists now. I just think now, you know, we don't do the best job at it, but there's definitely room for more versions of it. But it's the same masculinity that's still dominant to this day. Because ultimately, especially when you talk about Junto and Boots Smith and even Jones, you know, it was all about the pursuit of power. You know, the pursuit of power, the pursuit of money, right? Which some may argue is a synonym. You know, if you have money, you have power. But that's pretty much it. I mean, think about it. Junto didn't quote unquote like, you know, say I'm white, you're black, you know, like you do as I say, right? But it lived within him. You saw who worked for him, you know, and the thing is, I don't think he can't even, he don't got to say it to live it. You know, your actions speak louder than your words, right? It's kind of like like I always say, I one of the tweets that I saw that I think is so funny, true, and telling when it comes to just like how I guess, you know, some, you know, let me say some whites view blacks, right? Is there's this tweet where they have Republicans and Democrats, right? Replying to an inquiry for help from the working class, right? Republicans just say no. Democrats say no, and then they'll say BLM, and then they'll list their pronouns, right? And it's because what happens is the Democrats are a version, which I'm assuming in this meme, right? I'm assuming that the Democrats and Republicans are different versions of white people, right? You got the white people who don't help you, and that's it. All right. I ain't gonna say nothing else. I ain't gonna do nothing else. I'm just not gonna help you. But then you got some who say, hey, I'm not gonna help you, but I love you. Either way, you're not being helped.
Right. I don't
Right?
feel better about not being helped when you say you love me, right?
Yeah, you know, like I'm still about to crash out.
Yeah.
So, you know, to me, Junto is maybe like somewhere in between, I guess. I don't think he's like quite. I don't think he's necessarily a. Well, no, not even. He's a Republican. Really, he's a Republican, I
Yeah.
guess. In
All
this
the power.
analogy,
Yeah.
right? Because he's not necessarily saying like BLM or acknowledging
No.
pronouns or anything like that. Like He's just working. And the thing is, Boots has been dehumanized by the hustle, which is what happens to, so many of us, but we just don't talk about it in that way, right? We see everyone and everything as a transaction. And what's also interesting about Boots is his crabs in the barrel mentality, or the what is it? I'll stick with that, and if something else better come to me, I'll talk about that, right? But even with Boots, right? Like he has this thing where he's like, it's plenty money in Harlem if you know how to get it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he doesn't tell you or show you how to get it. He just has this parable that he says. And what happens is there are a lot of people who reach a certain level of what you may call success, and now they only have parables as guidance for you to get it. And the reason why that parable exists is because they fear if you get it, it takes away from them, as opposed to realizing that there's room in success for all of us, right? So Boots would rather have this aura of mystique than this aura of helping. And as far as Jones goes, I mean, I just kind of talked about it earlier. He wanted Ludi as as a trophy wife, right? Or maybe even just a trophy. If I can get her, and especially if somehow, some way I can go out in public with her, everybody's gonna respect me, because they're gonna be like, man, he's out with that beautiful woman, right? It was a symbol of self-worth for him to have her.
And it was all over the book. I know we typically don't like to give away too much of the book, but to illustrate this point, can we talk about the interaction between Boots and Junto when Junto was like, don't touch her no more?
Yeah.
How Boots was processing that, right? He wasn't like, nah, I love her. I think she's amazing. She's this high quality, wonderful woman, right? He was just like, what would I give up? I have this wonderful, fancy life over here. It was transactional. I think somebody used the word commodity. Even the way they were processing the value in connection with the woman in this case was just so demeaning. It was so lifeless and baseless, right? It was a lot to process and hear that. Go back to I guess he was the husband, maybe still is the husband because they never really divorced, but Jim. Jim was like, you just got out there with some other, and I don't want to use the N word and stuff, but I mean, it was no value for them as people. Like, and I think that's a lot that happens today, right? It's, I need to be the head of the house because, you are a step below. Some of those themes still hold true today. And I feel like, to Raymond's point earlier, some of these people just deserved more time, right? But you would make the book 800 pages.
I feel like for the most part, especially with that discussion between them two, to me, it started to just remind me, I think a point we made earlier, where it's like they just didn't see Ludi as like a human being or the way they, like you said, like a trophy. Because it's like, well, if I can get her, what would that mean for me? Would I give up all of this? And it's like, wait a minute, did anybody even consider she even like y'all? Like, she just trying to get a job and survive, and you guys are over here trying to call dibs, basically.
Yeah.
And
in that conversation, he was like, he was reminded that of the earlier conversation when he first talked to him. He was like, well, you're going to try to give me a job to mop floors and whatever. He's like, nah, I never offered jobs like that. And that was his kind of way of saying, I should give this up because he was so good to me, right? It never creeped in like that. That has nothing to do with, do I love this person? Do I not love him? Right? All that stuff. It was just a transaction, man. It wasn't.
Yep.
And for Boots, it was just, Ludi was a conquest,
Yeah.
like,
and he was saying that. He was like, I just wanted better.
I think about that and I won't go into too many details, but y'all know the scene I'm talking about. But when Boots and Junto are with Ludi, and Boots has this conversation in his head where he's like, well, I'm going to show him she's not going to be sloppy seconds for me, right? And I was just, of course, I saw the parallels, as we mentioned, with the toxic masculinity of today, but it was just how wild it was just to, see it on the page. It's the men definitely were trash, to say the least. But one other man that we haven't really discussed yet is, well, young man, right, is Bub, right?
Bub.
So what's y'all thoughts about him as a character, his trajectory, how everything that happened in the plot kind of shaped him, that type of thing?
You gotta love Bub. That's my heart right there.
Go ahead.
Right?
Love
Like the ultimately, man, Bub shows that, like, you ain't born like how you are when you're an adult. You shaped into it. Cause if he continues down the trajectory that he lived for most of the novel, like especially like just seeing him like just being high energy and stuff, right? Like I should say in the beginning, actually, right? In the beginning, you see this high energy boy just experiencing life, right? I can get into detail about the beginning, right? As long as I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Like so for example, he learns early and perhaps violently, right, that he shouldn't shine shoes, right? But ultimately all he was trying to do, and I think it's important to take into context the time in which this novel takes place too, he was taking advantage of a realistic opportunity to earn a little bit of money. Because what does he hear mom talk about all the time? Money, and how I don't have enough, right? So and it's interesting because a story collection I just read, right, is Stories from Tens Downstairs by Sadiq Fafona, right, which is excellent, by the way. And there's a scene in that work that's similar to the scene I'm talking about with the shoe shining, where this man gets out of jail, right, and he's trying to like be better, right? He doesn't want to like fall into like recidivism, I think, where you basically go back to prison like after you've been. So he ends up getting a job, and at his job, I don't remember like what exactly the company was, but basically he ends up having to wear a chicken suit like for his job, and he ends up telling his mom about it, and his mom tells him to call the place of appointment and let them know that he's worked his last day there, which to me was so telling, because it's like there are these jobs that apparently strip away your dignity, right? But because you are holding on to your dignity and your pride, you often turn to means that are not legal.
Yeah.
Right? And I think I've said enough.
Yeah, and I would add to that, right? So anybody who's ever grown up, especially in an urban city environment, Baltimore, LA, New York, whichever, um, if you stay in that environment long enough, you have two choices and how you can think about things. And the different sides is just the absence of hope or the installation of hope. You could see I am doing this terrible job that I don't like, that is menial to me. I don't like it. It dehumanizes me. But I see this as a path to the next step. I still have the hope that things will get better. What you find in the book here is that they're like, I was washing floors, I was a pullman, porter, whatever the job was. And I don't see that there's anything else out there except to hustle, right? To do the jobs. And we know we can translate that to today. That's the selling drugs on the corner. That's the stealing, robbing, whatever. Those two paths is what Bub is like almost at the corner of, right? And his mom is trying to put the guardrails up to guide him to one side. Now she's being honest with him. She's not hiding the fact that they don't have money, right? Any of us who ever grown up in an environment, mom and dad may have been honest and like, we don't have the money for that. But the difference is in how you process that is hope. Do you like, yep, we're struggling now. Mom and dad still love me. We're going to be better. I'm going to do better. There's other jobs out there. There's things and opportunities for me. Or is there nothing? And that's why I'm saying I love Bub. Bub is basically a latchkey kid like I was, right? He was the walk yourself from school. Oh, by the way, bring your sister, your brother, your cousin. Make sure y'all get in the house okay. Lock the door when you get home. And I love the fact that she showed some of the other parts of that experience, because we've heard about that. That's not new. But the fact that he was scared of the dark, right? That he was hearing footsteps and he was like, oh, they about to come get me. Like that part of it is the human part of being a little boy who's home, not just until 8 p.m. He could have been home because remember, she was going to school. She was doing the singing. She was doing a whole lot of stuff. He could have been home for 12, 13-hour stretches. And to hear and feel that. And of course, he gravitated to the ones he thought were nice people in suit and anybody else in the building, right? And that's where it made him so vulnerable to all these kind of things.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Bub was probably one of my favorite characters, but to put like a different touch on it, I guess to say, I think it hit me a little different only because while I'm reading all these things that go on with Bub, like my oldest son is the same age as Bub.
Yeah.
And it's just going through those emotions of like, you don't do it on purpose, but you kind of be like, okay, what if that was my kid? Just a thought, knowing my son, how he is, and him trying to be home alone at night, like putting himself to bed, putting on his pajamas, turn off all the lights, like that's just, I'm just glad it's something that he doesn't have to go through, something that, I don't have to think about. But I definitely think that a lot of the times that Bubs was going through something, I kept relating it back, to real life because, at one point I was my son's age, but I could walk home by myself 2 blocks. I wore the little shoestring necklace with the door key around it. I was one of those kids. Use that to get in, go in there, and
you better not lose your key.
Right, exactly. Don't lose that key. And like just to see my kid, sometimes I wonder. I'm like, well, I couldn't pay my kid probably $10,000 to do that right now. If hey, just go home, unlock the door, go in, make yourself a sandwich, turn TV on. He would be like, wait, what? Yeah, you're not coming with me?
It was
But just
a necessity though, right?
yeah, and just to think about it, especially the time with Bud when every time he was home alone, but he's trying to stay tough for his mom, right? He doesn't want to tell her, hey, I'm scared as hell being at home by myself every night. But he's trying to be that big kid. He's trying to step up. He's like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. I got this. So yeah, Bub definitely hit me differently throughout the entire book, but I love the little guy.
Yeah. And he was unfortunately and unknowingly a little pawn in like a game.
Exactly. Yep.
And I'm like, no, not Bub.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, right? Because even like Bub ultimately didn't have like a reliable adult around him too, and it goes to show how, once again, how when you are in a situation where you have to navigate poverty, how you are in it for self, or I should say you're in it alone from an early age, because this isn't to diminish Ludi, because we all know Ludi loved Bub, right? Was she perfect? No, but no one is, so who cares, right? I shouldn't even have to say that. But she had to work so hard that there were times where Bub needed her truly, but instead, and it goes to show how you have to live up to this version of masculinity. Go back to the prior question. You get what is it called? You get indoctrinated, right? Or indoctrinated into this version of masculinity from an early age too, because like another comment said, he had to be the man of the house, although he was a young boy who was scared of the dark. Demetrius, right? He was scared of the dark, but I can't say nothing because, you know, I don't want mommy to think she has to stay home when she needs to go get some money and make things better for us, right? So instead, what I'll do is I'll just get a tongue, lashing from her because I'm gonna just cut the lights on.
Yeah, and and I'm seeing some comments around our personal situations, and this goes back to something you said, Reggie, earlier. And I wish I'd tabbed the book, but there was a comment that was made in this discussion around how people react differently to pressures. Right? She was like, how that person took that pressure and is different than somebody else could. Right? So even Bub could turn out to be the finest gentleman ever, right? If his trajectory just kept going. Or he could be the one that, Ludi feared, which was he would be, destitute, didn't feel like anything else is possible. It's just how those pressures work on one person versus the other can be very, very different. So I love that she left that nuance in the book as well.
Got a comment from Audra between the reads. Can we also talk about how Ludi commented about walls constructed by white people that just press in on black people constantly?
I got a comment on that one right away. Do you guys think that some of that had to do with the earlier interactions with what happened with her marriage? Because it's kind of like we saw what happened, and then she kind of goes into it later on, talking about how it was hard for him to find a job and all of this stuff like that. So I'm not going to give him a pass for what he did, because that was like, I thought some hot grits were about to fly for a minute in there.
It should have been some hot grits flying.
Yeah, but
That's
it was
not
just,
cool.
yeah, I thought that was part of what she was trying to get on later on, and maybe it was just
Yeah.
she was seemed like she was kind of saying, maybe I never thought about, he's there, can't find a job because these people won't give him a job unless it's cleaning their floors and doing all this, or I just thought that maybe that played a part. Like I said again, not to give him a pass because he was dirty.
Yeah. I think this is where, having the layer of reading other stuff. I'm gonna pull Reggie's comment, not reading, being well read, but reading widely. If you read more nonfiction, right, and if you know more about that era, that time frame, you know more about how the pressures disproportionately impact impoverished areas, especially urban, and you put that layer on top of what's happening there, I think there's a lot to be said around how that constant pressure, and I like the word constantly in this particular comment, can have a long-term impact, not only on you directly if it's happening to you, but how it happens, how you think about your children and the people around you. So take Ludi, for example. Ludi has had some crazy, hard instances happen to her in her life. But that affects not only her opportunities, the things that she can do, the moves she makes, but then it's also how she raises her children, and then it just kind of passes on, and it gets worse as it goes because those pressures haven't gone away. The walls may actually get closer to one another. So I think the really important part is to, how did you process that, right? If you are reading this, that you're like, oh man, they could have changed their trajectory. Did you look at it in a way that you could say, well, like the boot said, man, there's money out here. You could just do things differently, or are you looking at it where, hey, they had no chance, or the walls were bad, and the opportunities weren't there, or do you leave it where there could be both, right? Both worlds can exist. Things could be hard for me. I could be a consequence of my own circumstances and environment, or there's some choices I can make. And I think the author didn't press on you that there's one answer. And I think that was very important in the book. She just presented the scene. She presented what they thought, how they were processing stuff, and left it to you as the reader. I didn't feel like she was preaching to me around one thing or the other, but just painted the scene perfectly and let you, the reader, absorb it.
Exactly, and it's interesting too, because I remember seeing a negative review of the street once that did call it like preachy and didactic, and I disagreed, because I think the existence of Boots like dismisses that altogether, because of all the stuff I was saying earlier, and because of what you said just about the fact that he's like, yo, you can make money out here. It's plenty. It's Harlem, baby. Like, it's money everywhere. It's falling off the trees. Like, I don't know why y'all on 1/16th.
Right.
Like, he made it seem like it was like, just abundant out there, right? And there, I don't mean to just regurgitate everything you just said, but like Petry really does show, like, hey, look, you can make it technically, but what are you giving up, right? And perhaps the most important thing, how much of your humanity are you willing to give up in order to make it, right?
Yeah.
How much of your feeling, like how much of a machine are you willing to become in order to quote unquote make it?
Yep. Got to lose the word fair, easy. All those words go away. And I also think, we were, the question was more about the pressures externally, but there's challenges inside of the house. Think about Pop. Pop was I forgot what Jim called it, but he was like a loser. He was alcoholic. He was everything. But you felt that family pressure from Ludi, which was, I know he messed up. Come on, Pop, you family. I know he's messed up while he here. What I'm supposed to do? He my family, right? You take the external, you take the challenges of just being a human being working in this world and living in this world, and then you add the internal family pressures. There was a lot going on, and I don't think this was too scientific or fantastical, right? This is how challenges work with all of us.
Yeah. Just to kind of follow up on that, you definitely, to get back to that walls analogy, you definitely saw a lot of her being squeezed in everywhere she turned. And there were times where she was trying to cut corners, right? Because I think there was, in the earlier part of the book, there was some type of um, foster child scheme, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Pop messed that up.
Yeah, Pop messed that up, right? So
I mean, it was a scheme.
Yeah.
Pop messed it up.
Mom was throwing them parties.
Yeah, because he was scheming too. The schemes ended up, crossing over in a bad way.
Hey, Pop,
Bathtub brew.
Here.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can definitely see examples in this book where it wasn't that none of the characters tried to get out of the situation, because clearly they were. But then we also see many examples of it's a constant, pushing back on them trying to exceed better. Like with Boots, right? He could get to a certain level, but it's not like he's going to get to Junto's level at some point, hypothetically, the way I read the book. But so yeah, those walls were definitely there, and we definitely started to see it in the beginning when she was working for that, with the Chandler's family. And how that experience of being a domestic, and the men making passes, that yeah.
So I did want to throw this back out to you and for everybody in the audience as well. I can't think of a really good parallel off the top, but as you guys were discussing, one of the things I think this book does really well is may challenge the reader to rethink their thoughts and position on people in situations like on people on that street. So people have made decisions to maybe go after a life of some illegal activity, people who have lost hope, people who are living on the street, drinking all the time, people who have messed up multiple times. I feel like even though this is fictional, I mean, there was no, I mean, there was nonfiction type themes in there. But just think about how if you read this, you could reframe your thought about, yeah, I guess. I mean, I can see how you could come to start doing that kind of life. You think that people read this and maybe lose a little bit of their judgment, lose a little bit of their critique, if you would, around people who potentially have made decisions like that.
In theory, you would hope that, but I think a lot of people would read it and still feel the same way. I'm a bit of a pessimist, whatever. But I think, there are people who just really believe like, hey, look, I got it from out the mud. You can too, man. You're the only thing holding you back. And I believe that people are hardened into that view. And if someone's already hardened, they're gonna read this book and just be like, hey, man, I came from somewhere like 1/16 too, and now I'm living like Boots. Hell, in this day and age, they might be living like Junto, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the aim of work like this, of course, is to provoke thought, possibly provoke change. That would probably be like the ultimate goal, provoke change, right? But minimally, provoke thought. And sure, it'll provoke thought, but I am pessimistic that tons of minds that are already hardened would soften.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would basically say if you read this and it doesn't, to me, that's not a failure on this book or Ann Petry. It's just because it's not a single bone in your body that's willing to change or think outside the box or to understand things from a point of view, because she wrote this in a way that just it lets you know, like she painted a perfect picture for you. So, like you said, my answer would be I hope so. If you don't, then it's just something on you, because she gave you the recipe, she gave you the inside look, and if you don't learn anything from it, then you just I don't know, you just who you are. So I hope you enjoy it.
I mean, and shout out to Brian and Corbin's comments over here, right? Like that is, to me, I find that to be the more common like line of thinking. To be honest, like so to me, and this is something that I've just been like kind of realizing and playing with mentally, like there's a way that blackness is presented in literature, right? Which that's maybe another like episode of this, right? But to me, the version of blackness that is presented here in the street, right, is consistent to like what I tend to see, because most of us by the time we become adults are really just trying to make it. Like I know so many of us who, we have a job, but then we got a second job or we got a side hustle. Like, oh yeah, I work at so and so bank during the day, but at night I be doing hair.
Right.
Or at night,
DoorDash.
I get on, I DoorDash, or like seriously, like I can't tell you, like I've definitely had conversations with some of my friends from college. They all from work and they out riding. I'm like, oh, where you headed? Oh, I'm door dashing. Because it's always like, we got to get more. It like the system is designed to make us feel like you got to get more. What you have is not enough, right? And this work, like Kenneth was saying, gives you the recipe. It shows you how they build that into all of us, right? So, I mean, hell, even me, like I do BAPC. We're on our, quote unquote side hustles right now, right?
No, not everybody. Just a few people. Just 3 out of 4. That's it. My mom said, "Look, you get one more email and one more phone number. I'm done. I'm not adding any more names." So now I see it, and the people in the comments are agreeing. It is definitely one of those things. I remember a comment from the movie, I think Wall Street 2, and the guy was approaching him. He's a billionaire already. Billionaire talking to a billionaire, and the guy said, everybody has a number where they'll walk away, right? And some people it's 100 billion, some people it's 200 billion. He said, "What's your number?" He said, "My number is more. I ain't never stopping." So there are a lot of people who have that same mentality. They get out of the projects, they get a house. Then the house got to be bigger. The car got to be multiple. Then it gets to the point where it's like, all right, well, you got all that. Now what? Well, I got to be able to do that in another city. I can't just have a house here. I got to have a house on the island or something. And it just starts to go, and it never stops, and they never get off that train. I think one of the things too, and this is, maybe the examples that we've been talking about is that one person making it or the success is we're flooded with anecdotes like that, right? You think about in the self-help books, there's always one dude that went from, working out of their garage, Bill Gates, and then all of a sudden now they're like a multi-billionaire. You can do it too. All you need is an old Mac computer and a garage, and you could own Microsoft. Like we get flooded with that a lot, and we gravitate towards it now because I think it's not because that example is the only example, just because we're reaching. We're, like you said, always on the hustle looking for somebody. Puff Daddy will tell you, or Diddy, whatever his name is now, will tell you that too. Like, you can do it, hustle from where you are, and you'll do it. Now I think it's driving us all to early death.
Yeah, it's like this, like DJ Khaled is like hilarious to me, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up seeing him. He had an interview like when his recent album was coming out, God did, and he was like, some people work 9 to 5, some people work night shift. I work all shifts.
All shifts.
And that had me like dying. But I also know like people really, they hear that and they're like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Like, I gotta work all shifts, like never stop, right? And then there's this another anecdote I seen where he's like, hey, when times get hard, work harder. When times are good, go even harder.
Yeah.
And it's just like the street, I feel like, and especially through Ludi, look at all the stuff you said earlier. She got her job as a clerk. She's going like to school or whatever, or taking those classes, trying to get to the next level. Then she's also trying to sing. So much so, she's doing so much work that her most important job is being sacrificed, which is motherhood.
Yeah. Hustle harder, man. That's all it is, Kenneth.
Shout out to DL calling out Demetrius for having about 9 jobs.
If it wasn't for your friends, who would keep you straight, man?
Demetrius, what are your 9 jobs? Do we have time to talk about them now?
We do. You're seeing one of them. Black Men Read. It's my big passion. Chief Learning Officer, Kaiser Aluminum. Of course, mom. I got to take care of my mama. My mama live with me. Got a wife and 4 kids. We're on a store, Resist Booksellers. And if things go well, that thing might get even bigger because we might be moving to a brick and mortar location. So I won't tell you about the rest because I can't tell you yet.
He named 6 right there if you were keeping count.
Yeah, I can't name the rest though. And a DoorDash.
He got some side hustles he can't talk
7
about on Bill Gates' internet.
I cut hair. Got a crypto mining business. My sons, we got a rack in the car in the garage.
9.
There we go.
The
and I
sports
could
podcast
look.
too.
I do. Sports podcast. I'm out. I had to let it go. I was about to be a divorce husband. She was like, "That's enough.
Doing too much.
You're doing too much."
So
sports podcast. I'm going now. I had to let it go.
So he gave us bookseller. He gave us day job, right? Chief Learning Officer. Black Men Read Now. Son, father, husband. Crypto. and so many that I'm losing count. And you just named them.
Yeah.
He's missing one more.
Bookseller.
Yeah.
So 8. So I got 8 of 9 that I could just recite just now.
Yeah.
There is a 9th one though that he has left out.
Oh gosh. Dang on it.
What is that?
Black Readers Con.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it was 9.
It's probably 12, which is I'm losing count. But
Demetrius thought he escaped 1/16th, but he is.
I am 116.
He is 1/16.
Queens get the money.
Now, I do got a question for you guys because I know we don't like to give away too much stuff, but I kind of wanted to know what you guys felt about the ending. And the only reason I asked that is because I think when I posted that video about the book, it was one of the things where I said, you know, hey, if you thought this was going to be a fairy tale, happy-go-lucky ending, it's like, no, it's the street. You know, this real. And I got my wife to read the book. She loved it. And then through her mother wanted to read it and she loved it, but she just got to the ending and she said she didn't like the ending at all, only because it was so, I guess, like heartbreaking for her, because it gets to the last page and you're just like, wait, what? That's, huh? Like, that's where what happened? No. And to me, I was just like, it's real. I mean, that situation, everything that occurred, I mean, I can definitely see it going that way, I guess is how I would put it.
I remember one time I'm having an IG live, right? And or I should say I was invited on one. And during the conversation, my interlocutor said, when I read, I like to go to books for comfort. And I said, I like to go to books to be disturbed. And that ending is disturbing, right?
Definitely.
So for me, and the reason why I do that is because I think a lot of things in life are disturbing. And disturbing becomes real as a result, right? That's why when Kenneth says that ending was real, it was real disturbing. And for me, I vibe with it. I appreciate Petry going there. And I could envision, that's how that would go, right? Because it could have went another way, right? I think, and to be real, here's the irony. If it went the other way, and maybe I guess I'll get into that detail with y'all off air, that's probably even more saddening, even more heartbreaking.
I will say my feelings on, I won't tell what the ending was, is goes back to a comment I made earlier. She walked us through this world, and I felt like when I got to the final chapters, I was like, there's about 15 different possibilities, some more likely than others. But I can't say I'd be surprised, but no matter the situation that came out at the end, I would have felt something about the ending. She made me feel for the characters. I felt for the situations. And to have what happened at the end, that was one of the ones that I thought was like possible, but I didn't see it. I can't say I fully saw that coming. I couldn't write that ending. But I still felt for the ending. And I felt if you didn't walk away devastated, then you probably didn't feel along the way the same way. I think this is it was a good ending for the book, and the fact that this wasn't a happily ever after type book, right? But she didn't surprise you with that at the end. This wasn't like, oh my God, everybody's getting it. Ludi is now, manager at the Macy's. Gosh, this is like, it wasn't, she never took you on that trajectory. So you had to think that this could be the depths of hell. This could be some kind of middling version, or it could be somewhat positive, but I didn't think it was ever going to be, perfect ending. I never felt that along the way in the book.
Yeah, I'd say for me, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I hope I didn't give anything away, Kenneth, in that comment. I was trying to be as vague as possible.
Nah,
that was vague.
We had somebody leave the chat. They were like, I'm 3 chapters away. I got to go.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
we
good.
didn't give away nothing.
Yeah, I was trying to like be super vague. But
Yeah, I think for me, like you said, Demetrius, I tried to picture how it was going to end. Could not see that ending for the life of me. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like at the end of the day, she's still looking out for Bub. Whether we liked what she did or not, she was still looking out for him in some way.
What, the ending you said?
Kinda, yeah. Unless y'all disagree with me.
I mean, I'm definitely not one that's invested in like being right, but that is thought provoking. I appreciate you going there with that, because I don't know if I agree, but I do like the idea of what you said being true, though. That's interesting to me.
Okay.
There was a couple people that will probably want to be in on that discussion. So I think it's worth a little smaller discussion on the side for the folks who have not read the ending.
Right.
Corbin said, I needed a palate cleanser. After the ending was devastating. I'm hearing that. But I think there's some folks who haven't read it. So we don't want to ruin it for you, but definitely I feel like if you're two, 3 chapters away, you're probably already invested in reading the end. If you haven't read the book at all, definitely check it out, because if we were to tell you what happened in the ending, none of that would make sense, right? You gotta take the trip to going up there in order to have and understand the discussion that Reggie and Raymond are having around, you know, was Ludi doing it in the best interest of Bub, or did she have the best interest of Bub in heart?
So
Reggie's thinking about it though.
As of this recording, right? Because you know, who knows when someone will see this discussion, right? As of this recording, I think Ludi did what was best for Ludi.
Ken was thinking too. He's looking into the creative cortex of his
Yeah.
brain.
I can see that.
I
Yeah,
thought
I
I
can see
had
that
like
too.
a full understanding of what I thought, but now it's like, because I'm just replaying the whole last thing.
It sounds like the last chapter needs a reread.
And I'll even say this: Ludi is not. This does not make Ludi a bad person. I think that's important to say, because there's too much of that going on where we try to moralize it. Oh, you do this, you're a bad person. So Ludi's still my fave. Like, don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
But ultimately, right? I think what Ludi did was best for Ludi. And yeah, that's what I'll say. As of this recording, that's how I feel.
Okay, but without saying too much, Raymond, do you feel like she's doing what's best also for Bub, because of the only reason she's in this situation is because of she's trying to do better for her life with the singing career and things like that?
Yeah, and I guess kind of like what Audra was mentioning, and I'm trying to say this without giving anything away, right? But I guess my thinking was like, with how stuff went down, there was going to be one or two options that ended up that she's going to end up in a certain position. Bub was going to be, regardless, Bub was going to be SOL, right? In some
form of fashion.
In some form or fashion, in the various alternative endings it could have been. But I guess the way I thought about it was at least how the character portrayed herself, as making it seem as if she was doing this for him, even though that might not be the case. But
I think it. So Raymond, you led me to a slightly evolved thought, right? Which is the initial intent was what was best for Bub, right? It morphed into what's best for Ludi.
okay, yeah, I see that.
Okay.
I see that, people. The melding of the minds and ideas and thoughts and discussion. You ain't got to be right. you come up to a different understanding, right?
Yeah, if you invested in being right, you're doing it wrong anyway.
Especially not with good literature, right? There's no like, yeah, that's exactly what she said because you were in the head of the writer. No, that's not how that works. No, I like that.
I don't even think Petry herself was invested in being correct or right.
Yeah,
You know?
no, didn't feel like it, right?
Yeah. I love this comment by Corbin. When I was done, I felt like I just finished a super depressing episode of Good Time.
Shout out Corbin too because I've been rocking hard saying Ludi's my ace and my Bub is my heart. Ludi is like the queen, right? But shout out to Corbin for saying I stand with Bub, despite my constant standing of Ludi in this chat.
Yeah. No, and especially in literature, you want to see that innocence. You like that joy. I mean, there was one scene where he was running around the corner, and he was like prancing like a kangaroo. I forgot how they described him, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what we want our kids to be, especially little Black boys. Be filled with joy,
yes,
filled with happiness, like oblivious to the world. Even when he was being tricked, right? You were like, yeah, because he's a little boy, right? You're going back to this is what little kids are, and I'm glad that was part of the story as well.
Well, before we wrap up, is there any? Well, I do have one question for Reggie before we do the wrap up. What other? I know you've read some other Ann Petry books outside the street. Any you recommend for us to read next go around in the future? And anything you want to promote for that for the Ann Petry's catalog?
The Narrows for sure.
Okay.
And a good thing too is like right now the current edition that's out is like the I think it's Northwestern University Press edition. It's a nice little cover, like a mysterious lady on the front. I don't have any other Petry's works with me, but Mariner is actually re-releasing Country Place, Miss Muriel and Other Stories, and the Narrows, all the covers kind of look like this, but they're just different colors, and they come out in January. And because I'm a Petry fanatic, I'm gonna get those to go along with my Northwestern University Press edition. So I'm gonna have all them joints. So yeah, I mean the Narrows is fire. It's interesting because my co-host Akili from Books of Pop Culture, he and I just like sometimes just have discussions about Petry, and we talk about which one we think is better. And he tends to gravitate towards the Narrows, and I tend to gravitate towards the street. And to be honest, I feel like I gravitate towards the street because I feel like Ludi as a protagonist is extremely dynamic. And what I will say about the Narrows, though, as far as a comparison goes, the Narrows is like stylistically more ambitious. Like so the reading experience is a bit different because you could tell Petry had wrote a couple books and she was trying to like just kind of showcase talent, in which I think she did very well, right? But I think I would give the edge to the street. I think the street's maybe a little bit tighter as a narrative and as a story. And I think and I think that worked out a little bit better for me. Now, I'll also do this because I think this is interesting. If you want to read some books that I think are in conversation with the street, right? The book I mentioned earlier, Sadiq Fafana's Stories from the Tenants Downstairs, would be awesome. And then there's this more less heralded book that came out in 2020 called Stateways Garden by Jasmine Drain that I think would be awesome here too. And I'll even throw in The Women of Brewster Place if y'all haven't done that yet.
Mm-hmm. No, we have not done that one.
Yeah.
I think the if my memory is correct, in the couple years that we've been around, we've only done one short story collection, and that was Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filion.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that copy.
I mean, that's canonical work there. So I mean, yeah y'all You guys definitely
We
did
did
much better
have a
than that.
couple that came up, I think, in some votes, but I think that was the only one that I can remember. I might be wrong. That we've done. So Reggie, before we get into our final announcements, we want to tell people about some other things coming up. Talk. We had the question come up. Tell them about the podcast. Tell them about books of pop culture. Plug what you got next, whatever, and also like the cadence, because you guys do have a cadence of when things come out.
Appreciate you saying that, Demetrius. And yeah, sure. So, I myself, Reggie Bailey, and my co-host Achille Missouri, who you can follow as well. His Instagram is a Black Man Reading. So definitely like get into him just as an individual as well, because he's just a dope, human being. But as far as the work we do together, that is Books Are Pop Culture. Books of Pop Culture is our, as he said, podcast, where, episodes come out Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays, we release episodes just covering the latest and greatest in book news. Um, Thursdays are episodes where they are centered on a book, right? The majority of the Thursday episodes feature authors because we discuss their books with them. And some Thursdays are our book of the month episodes where Achille and I, and maybe a guest. We recently had shout out to Theodore Gill at Theo Reads _ recently had him on to discuss We Cast a Shadow with us. So those episodes are interesting, and we've now even started to have guests for the Monday episodes, right? Because we're not the only two people talking and thinking about book news. So we just try to just bring people something a little different here and there. And we also have a Patreon where we just talk about whatever's on our mind, right? That's bonus content. That's fun too. A lot of times hip hop is on our mind, but we might talk about a little bit of tech. We might talk a little bit about basketball. We might talk a little bit about this or that. We're kind of funny guys too. I'll toot our horn a little bit. We're a little funny, so
I
you
was
might
gonna
want
say
to.
that you got to hit
Yeah,
the Patreon, man.
yeah.
If you like good content, right, and books of pop culture, and both of them individually is good content, you got to support, because it takes time, it takes money, it takes equipment, it takes graphics and all this other stuff, and they're putting in the work to give you great, amazing content. Like the authors that are being talked about are not just average people. They're getting huge names to come down and have a conversation. So if nothing else, go give you $5. I think that's one of the levels in your Patreon. You get access to more content, so it's not like just $5 you're throwing it to an empty collection plate. It is actually, you're gonna get more for it, but it's worth it. Like, so make sure you do that. Books of pop culture. Reggie Reads has been a big supporter of the Bookstagram community in general. So it's not that he's just doing it to be doing it, but look,
Hey.
and I can tell you, look, he was one of the first people to buy the gray shirt. I'm telling you, he puts his money where his mouth is, and we should do the same thing to support artists like that as well. So, Raymond, I know you got some announcements for us. Got some other things that's coming up from our side, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. So we have our next 3 books for the rest of the year. October, we're going to be reading the graphic novel series Black by Kwanzaa Osayefo. Our book club conversation will be on October 23rd. Our November book club pick will be Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. We'll be talking about that in November 27th, I think is that Sunday. And then our December pick is going to be Long Division by Kiese Lehman. And we'll be talking about that on December, I think, 17th. But the dates will come soon. So those will be our next 3 books for the rest of the year. Go ahead, Demetrius.
I was going to say, and we also were gifted copies of Patriarchy Blues. So I'm opening up as of this discussion. If you're in here, if you have not gotten a copy of the book, let me know. DM Black Men Read, and we'll get a copy to you in the mail. Frederick Joseph was kind enough to work with his publishing team to get us copies, and we've been shipping out copies all week long. So if you already told us you wanted one, it's in the mail. But if you have not, send a DM to Black Men Read. Our goal is to also get the author so we can chat with them about the book. We want to discuss the book together. So we're doing some things to kind of close out the year strong. So definitely, if you have not done so, make sure to follow this channel here. We're going to bring all those discussions here. So we'll have some discussions on October 10th. We have a discussion coming up there. We're going to try to do more and more of those throughout the year and going into next year right here on this platform. So if you're not following, I don't know where the button is anymore, but hit the subscribe so you can be reminded of things that are coming up. All right, fellas, look, it's been amazing chat. Thank you guys for being so active in the chat over here. It's been really helpful. Reggie, as always, thank you for your continued support. We love the work that you're doing, and anything that we can do to reciprocate that love, you know, just a DM, text message, phone call, WhatsApp, Instagram message, whatever platform you go to. I got 6 phones, so it don't really matter. They're going to ring at some point, but just let us know, man. We're always here for you. Raymond, thank you. Kenneth, thank you. And thank you, Corbin. Corbin's also one of our admins. He was over in the chat. Thank you for guys for hanging on, and thank you all for the support. Black Men Read coming back next time, and hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank y'all. This was a pleasure.
Take care, y'all.